You're listening to Reach, Teach, Talk with Nat Dane.
I'm here with Eric Wlasak, who is the first person that I'm interviewing for this podcast. And I'm just really excited because Eric is the cover star of Time to Teach, Time to Reach. And I met Eric 3 years ago when he was referred to me by a parent who just absolutely said glowing things about you. And it's about the power of your connection with her kids. Yeah. And when I started talking with you about how you connect with kids when you're teaching, you drew from your 20 years of teaching classroom experience.
Crazy.
And I think I've, what do you say, like 30 years plus.
But yeah,
working with kids.
I did the math the other day. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like a real career.
Yeah. And, and I learned so much. And it got me really thinking hard about just how you and how we as teachers connect with our students. And, you know, the power of connection is the theme of this podcast. And Eric, I'm just so happy to have you here with us.
Thank you. It's great to be here. It's great to be here. I'm honored, actually, to be in the book, on the cover of the book, and to be your first guest.
I'll show it again. This is the book cover right here. Time to Teach, Time to Reach. Eric Wlasak, 2 years ago, right there. When you think about a moment when you connected with your students that may have involved it was a surprise or something where you're in the classroom and something happened, and suddenly the teacher saw your authentic self, and the students, and they actually found it to be you found it to be actually a connective experience.
Gosh, you know, I would say anytime I did something wrong, anytime you make a mistake, because just letting them see that you're human, letting them see that, oh my gosh, you know what, he actually can make mistakes, and he learns from his mistakes, and he's willing to make mistakes in front of his students. It's always better that way.
But isn't making a mistake as a teacher something that you don't want to do?
I'm sure many people feel that way, but I feel like it's you're human. It's so easy to think that you're not going to be human, to be the person in front. Everyone's looking at you. You think, okay, you have to have all the answers. But if you go into it like that, that's so much pressure. And I really don't know everything. So to go into a classroom and just realize, okay, I'm going to do the best I can do, be my most authentic self. And when I make a mistake, I taught third grade. I can't remember if you mentioned that, but I taught third grade. And in third grade in particular, to be able to show that you can make a mistake and either, laugh at yourself about it or learn from yourself about it and to move forward, because that's what we teach our students every day. It's okay to make a mistake. That's why pencils have erasers. That's, all those things. So it's kind of like it's okay to make mistakes. And so if you can model that and just model it all the way through, making the mistake and not beating yourself up and letting it go and showing them all of those different shades and colors to making a mistake, it's so much easier. Plus, it just frees you up,
It frees you up, and it would free you up. But I imagine for many teachers, it actually would kind of lock them down because they feel that they are not being the perfect teacher.
Potentially, yeah.
How is perfection kind of pernicious in teaching then?
Well, I think it's a scary mindset. I think perfection, because how can you reach that? And what does perfection mean? What does that even look like? So I don't even know how you can define perfection in terms of education, because every student's different, every classroom is different, every year is different. Sometimes the curriculum is different. So how can you be perfect with a new curriculum or with a particular student? You really have to just kind of do your best and keep your aim true and just kind of figure, you're ready, you're prepared, and making a mistake is fine.
It's so funny you're talking about the kids are really watching for you to do your best and to be true and to be authentic, and they won't articulate it, right? Like third grade is right. They're like 8 years old, 9 years old,
8,
right?
9, yeah.
So they're not going to say to you like, yeah, I'm watching you and I'm learning from you as a person and I'm learning about character traits in you. But it is true that they are, as Ted and Nancy Sizer here on The Students Are Watching book, which is phenomenal. The students are always watching, and they're not watching. Well, here's my question for you then. Yeah. How do you create a classroom environment where the students are watching you not with I want to watch him make a mistake and catch him at it, but with more empathy? Like, if Mr. Wlasak makes a mistake, I'm not going to mock and laugh at him. That's not the name of the game. So how do you, knowing that the students are watching, how do you create a classroom that embraces that?
The reality is, honestly, for me, it was always the first day. There was always like a moment where we'd start the day and I would just kind of go through, just that respect is the basis for everything we do. It's the foundation of everything we have in our classroom. We respect each other. You'll respect me. I'll respect you. All these kinds of things. And when you have that as your basis from day one, first of all, it relieves them because they realize, oh, he's not out to get me. He's not out to find things wrong with me. And I'm going to feel safe in this classroom. The whole idea is that everyone feels safe and they feel seen and they feel heard in every classroom. And so when they have those three, when they feel safe, I feel all education comes from that, because safety means I'm not going to be made fun of for academic things, for physical things, race, ethnicity, any kind of demographic you could think of. It's going to be an area, a room in which I can really be my authentic self. Going back to your original question. So when you have that as your basis, I find that they're not really looking at you to make a mistake. They're just watching you. They're eager to learn from you.
You brought up the word safety quite a bit, and I'm just curious about that word, because we tend to think about, as teachers and as the only adults in the room, that that it is up to us to create classrooms that are safe for our students. But how about flipping it? Mm-hmm. How important is a feeling of safety for you as a teacher? And what do you think when you think of that word?
Oh my gosh, it's huge. At a school, as I came out in 2000, period, I think 2000, and to my first principal. And up until then, it wasn't like I was hiding everything about myself, but it was a piece of myself that I just felt like I couldn't, that not only did I feel like I couldn't share at school, that it could cost me my job potentially. Because back then it was, education and sexuality weren't really in sync. So to be able to be my authentic self, just coming to work every day, just knowing that my teacher friends know who I am and the admin knows who I am. Having that kind of safety, and when you feel safe as who you are as a person, you just do your best teaching, as far as I can tell, because you're not hindering any thoughts. You're not hindering yourself. You're eager to get to. You feel like you can walk into the classroom, into the school, into the district, and be yourself.
It's interesting. Thank you for sharing that. It's interesting that you focus on the importance of feeling known amongst your colleagues, your principal, and the other. You actually didn't mention the students, and I'm not sure if what you were referring to is coming out to your students necessarily. But why is it important for a teacher, and why is it important for you to be known as who you completely are by your teachers? Why is that important? Because and I'm thinking about how teachers talk about classrooms being kind of silos. Right. I'm with the kids all day, but I crave actually being around adults. But clearly we are aware that we are in a village of adults as well.
Yeah. I think it's just because you see them every day, and you see them every day, and what happens to you in your life impacts how you're feeling that day. And to feel like you can't share things in the teacher's lounge or whatever, it gets to be ridiculous after a while, especially when you see the freedom of other people. Oh, they're getting married, they're having kids, and it's this big celebratory thing that everyone's talking about everywhere else. In terms of with the students, I wasn't necessarily saying with the students necessarily, because it just never really came up. But with the faculty, just for myself as an adult in the building, it was really important. I should say this. It wasn't important until it was. It didn't really impact me, I didn't think, until I felt it after I was out with my coworker friends, because I was like, oh, I really am myself. I really can just come in like, oh, I was never, not that I was afraid of it being found out, but I guess maybe on some level I was. But just that it was like, I've never had that 360-degree feeling in my career before, because it really didn't feel like it was allowed before. And that's a interesting process.
Wow, that's really well described. And thinking about the theme of this episode is about the power of connection.
Right.
We actually walked down a road about the importance of our connection with our colleagues. If there's anything, do you have any advice you can give in terms of why it's important to have trust-built connections with your colleagues? Because, as a third grade teacher, your classroom was your world, and you were building that world, and clearly you were in charge of that world.
Yeah.
Yet, knowing that your teachers, your colleagues, your administrators had your back,
right,
even though they barely entered your world, was important.
Yeah.
What can you say or advice you can give toward the importance of connection with your colleagues?
Well, I think it's about who you are. It's bringing who yourself, because the other part of it is that our job is so personal. You get so invested. You bring every part of yourself to the classroom, your energy, your time, your humor, your determination. Everything will go into it, because you're there. Ultimately, you're there for your students. That's really what it's all about. And to feel supported by the admin in creating the best environment for your students, you want to work in the best environment for yourself. And, I think about every time, I work at a phenomenal school. And the commute is horrible. I live in LA. So it's like it's a half hour to work, but an hour and a half every day. And every day when the traffic gets on my nerves, I just think, oh my gosh, I could work at that school. That school's closer. That school's off Sunset. I don't have to work off. I could be there, be home sooner. But to know I'm at a school that totally accepts me and supports me, that's where you want to work. That's where I want to be. Because I think with anybody, you want to go to a job where you feel supported and cared for, and like I said, supported.
When you think about a school, what word comes to mind? When a school is like a blank.
I'm not sure what you mean.
What I'm thinking of is you were describing a school. You're describing the importance of your relationships with your colleagues, with your students, with your administrators.
Yeah.
And a lot of people who have never been, let me walk back. A lot of people who have never been to a school before as a teacher, who have never worked in a school. We've all been to school. We all feel like we know what a school is.
Yeah.
They view a school through perhaps an organizational lens, like a school is a corporation for kids.
Yeah.
Right? Would you agree with that?
No. And nothing wrong with that. I would say someone could probably speak differently to that. But now I think about it, if a school is a home, it really is. You have so many people of different ages, and they spend so much of their day there, and they do so much growing there and learning there and discovering and about themselves, about each other, about how to relate to one another, how to work with adults, how to work with different people, how to work with different genders. I mean, you just learn so much, and you're there for an extended period of time. Generally, you're there about 6-7 years. So to have that, you want to have a home feeling. You want to feel like this is their second home. And there's a responsibility with that to make sure it's a nurturing, caring home.
Okay, go ahead.
That they get to go to every day.
Excellent. So thinking about homes, I just had my house remodeled and just redesigned, just new wallpaper and new backsplash in the kitchen. I never knew what a backsplash was until about 6 months ago. So,
Ka-ching.
Ka-ching. So, yeah, and that too. But I'm thinking about your classroom. If you were to scan your classroom right now and think about what's on the walls and how it's laid out and how you've designed your home,
right?
What are some of the items that you have in your classroom that serve to help with connection with your students?
It's I would say, first of all, they usually pretty much sit in groups, but I change that up every month who they sit with. And the other thing is I have this, but I can't take credit for it. This is from my student teaching experience from 21 years ago. I have a different empty desks just called thinking desks. And the theory is, it's not punitive. The idea is that it's like, when you sit in these groups for so long, sometimes you just need your own personal space. And so it's and some people a student can go there at any time and just kind of sit and work by themselves. It's quieter and whatever. But that also allows me to kind of come up and say, how's everything going? And just checking in with them or whatever. But there's those kinds of moments. We have just various things that go on every morning. We have like a whole routine of things, and one of them is saying the pledge, and one of them is doing the school calendar and things like that, the classroom calendar rather. And it just allows me that one-on-one time with the students, and they rotate each week who does what. So there's a line leader and all these things, all the third grade stuff, but the third grade big deal stuff. And but each time it allows me, even just walking to a class, by having a line leader, you can talk to someone, and it really is. But it's really just checking in with them, but also just recognizing that a connection with a student doesn't just mean being nice to someone. It's mean you really get to know them, really getting to know who they are, and they get to know you, and have an actual relationship. The relational teaching you're talking about.
I love the empty desk.
Wasn't it great? Yeah, that's why I stole it.
That's fantastic. Well, that's meant to be plagiarized. Some things are meant to be plagiarized.
Lila Petiti, first grade.
But you hit on a theme, actually, that I was hoping I would be able to have a chance to address with you, which is this idea of talking about connection and the power of connection. Mm-hmm. People can misinterpret that as saying, okay, your job is to connect with these students, with these kids. Yeah. And we default to thinking, oh, that means be nice. That means, shake their hand every day and look them in the eyes, which I imagine you do, actually, or probably.
I greet them every day at the door.
Which is absolutely important.
It's huge.
Yet, teaching, okay, let's get back to learning, right? Like, learning is never a passive activity. Learning involves challenge. And you have to grade. You have to give feedback. You have to give parents maybe some tough news sometimes about, or you have to give the students tough news sometimes. Yeah. So why is it important then to connect with the students in terms of your overall job, which can also involve giving negative feedback and whatnot?
Because negative feedback isn't seen as negative feedback when there's that automatic when they know that you trust their child, the child trusts you. Because I think along with that, if the first thing you say is a negative thing, it's going to come across that way. But when you have that relationship from walking to the classroom or, sitting at a different desk or whatever, and have those conversations, you build that relationship, you build that trust. And so your first communication with them is not a negative interaction. On top of the fact that my philosophy has always been that before then, you really praise the positive. So when the negative comes, they're more likely to hear you. And that goes for parents, that goes for certainly the students. But it's all about a sense of being able to grow. But it goes back to your first question about, when I make a mistake, that can be seen as a negative. But if you go through it, it's like, oh, okay, it's a bump in the road. And not every bump in the road is a code red. It's like you pick your self up and you move along.
Fantastic. You take the long view.
Yeah, you really have to, because again, luckily I have the luxury of having the entire year with the same group of students. So you really get to know them, and it's the end game. But you have to. I think beyond that, it's kind of like, I want them to get through third grade, but these are, they used to call them soft skills, but I call them foundational skills. All those interpersonal communication skills, because you need those to continue on. It's one of those things. It's one of those things that I always joke around with my principal. I said, I'm going to say this, and I might get fired over it. But for me, it was always more important for me that my students love coming to school. Because if a student loves coming to school, they will learn, they'll be present, they'll be ready. But if they hate coming to school, they could care less what a noun and a verb are. But if they love school, not only will they want to know what a noun and a verb are, but they'll start discovering it for themselves. So it's about just creating that environment where they want to be every day. It's a home. They want to feel safe. It's authentic.
Can you give me an example of a time where you found it to be really challenging to connect with a student?
I'm sure there have been times. I'm just trying to think, because, when you think back to the year, you always kind of, I picture how the student was at the end of the year, or my relationship with the student, how it was at the end of the year. And it always ends on a positive stretch. So I think it's just, I really can't think of a time when it was difficult to really connect.
Probably because you set the foundation so well in the first.
Yeah,
day.
well, I didn't mean to be like a backhand compliment, but I'm sure there are. I'll put it this way. Some days are more challenging than others, and that might be because the AC is out or whatever. There's a lot of reasons why things are difficult. But I don't know. I just keep thinking, they're 8. They're 8 years old, and they've been on the planet for 8 years. They've been walking for 6. They've been in school for 5. They're learning to read and write, and they've been doing that for 3 years. So it's like cut them some slack. Everyone's trying to figure it out. And they're all bringing in different parts of themselves to the classroom every day. So it's like, how do you, everyone's going to be in a different place. So it's kind of like my job is to connect with each student, each time, each year. And I said, maybe I don't find it challenging because that's kind of the fun for it for me, is really finding, okay, how can I connect with each person, and how can I make that person laugh, or how do they make me laugh, or whatever.
I would say, especially working with younger kids,
the
connection with the parents is extremely important.
Absolutely,
because you guys you form a team. It's a teacher, parent, student triangle, right?
Yeah.
What advice would you give to parents who maybe first-time parents whose kids are about to enter to your class, right, third grade? What advice would you give to them about how to connect with their teacher, and why is it important for them to get to know the teacher as well?
Right. Yeah, it's a two-handed street, because they're going to hear my name a lot over dinner. They hear a lot of stories, so it's kind of it's always good. I mean, back to school night's always an important time, but I mean, it's always it's kind of incumbent on the teacher too to really kind of build that connection. It's with technology now, you can send an email. Phone calls are always kind of better, but there's email. You can we have a back to school picnic that we have every year. So in those kinds of events, it's really important that they know who you are. Because they're very curious, And the other thing is too, the other part that can be difficult or a challenge sometimes for just talking with any parent at any time is because everyone kind of comes into school with their own memories of what it was like for them at school. So when you have a parent who might have had a tough time in school, they might still view school through that lens, like, oh, it's a difficult place, or it's hard to make friends, or it's a place where you aren't successful. So you kind of bring that. Sometimes that concern kind of comes up. So it's kind of like remembering that each year is a new year. It's okay to come in and talk to your teacher, your child's teacher, and just kind of check in. But yeah, I'm not sure if that answered your question.
You did beautifully. And I'm not going to, for my final question, I'm not going to give you a lens, but I'm going to give you a portal, Eric, to the you when you were a third grade student.
Oh, Lord.
And if you were your own teacher, what advice would you have given on how to connect with Eric Wlasak, 8-year-old Eric?
Oh, my gosh. Wow. That's a great question. I never thought about that. I would say, gosh, it's so funny. I can put myself back in my third grade. I'll tell you this. I don't know how, but I know my third grade teacher did. Mrs. Reed, Caroline Reed. She was awesome. It's one of those things it's a mixed bag where I kind of have some memories of it. And then I just kind of, and I remember my friends were in my classroom. And, but the thing that was so great about it is, sometimes you have these memories like, it's like kind of off topic, but I'll come back, I promise. I worked at a summer camp way when I first started working with kids, and I was a fellow camp counselor said to me, she goes, they really won't, these kids aren't going to remember us in 20 years. And she goes, that can be kind of depressing because we put so much stuff into being a counselor, But when they think about camp, they will have a really warm memory about it, and they'll feel really good about it, but they won't know why. So I kind of bring that to my third grade year. I remember she was my favorite teacher, and I remember some certain moments, and she really got to know me. Like if I got to know me, but I have that warm feeling in me when I think about third grade, and there's some of that that's tangible, some I don't know why, and I think it's because that I did feel connected.
It sounds like you also felt safe. I mean, that's
completely. Oh my gosh, it was. Yeah, I just look back. That was the first year. And it wasn't that the previous years were horrible. It was just something about that third grade year. I think it was the friends were in it, and the teacher, and the way she was, and her personality. And so, a lot of what I bring to my third grade classroom, I think that's why I love teaching third grade so much, because it was really she put that imprint on me. That was that's just a fun year, and it really is. It's a really fun year.
That was Miss Reed?
Caroline Reed, yeah.
Okay.
She just passed recently, I have to say. It was like I was a couple of years ago, I was kind of taking stock of myself and doing a little inventory, and I was writing letters to some people who I wanted to thank over my career. And I sent some out, and I went to look her up, and she had just passed, like maybe the March before, which was horrible. But which was interesting, but I meant to say this too. When I first started teaching, 1998, my mom worked at the district that I grew up in, and she had, unbeknownst to me, sent a letter to Caroline Reed. She was then retired in Arizona, and Caroline Reed sent me a letter in 1998, and I wish I could find that letter. But it was so powerful to read that. And she goes, "Oh, I remember you in third grade," and this and that. It was really a beautiful moment, and and it was so interesting to see her cursive writing that. That 1978 cursive writing that teachers had.
I remember the stationery. It was the thick line, and then the dot line, and then the thick line.
We still use it.
Yes. Do you still teach the letter Q the way that it is? It was so odd. The uppercase letter Q. I never thought
so many different ways. Exactly.
Anyway, so you're still teaching cursive. That's another episode. That'll be another episode. Handwriting and its importance through the new millennium.
Can I tell you something? I love doing it. The kids love doing it. It's one of those things. That's what we're with third grade. Cursive writing and multiplication. Yeah. Those are the two things that kids want to learn because it makes them feel like they're adults.
Yeah. Well, hey, Eric, thank you so much. Eric,
this is great.
Eric Wlasak, helping us as adults, to remember the importance of how we connect with our students, with our kids, and through vulnerability, through creating classroom environments of safety, through feeling respected and valued by your peers,
Absolutely.
And supported by your peers and your colleagues, despite the classroom being a silo, and also just really being able to reflect back on the importance of the teachers that we grew up with and the feelings that they brought. Even if you don't remember exactly what you learned, except you learned cursive, it's how you felt, and that feeling of belongingness being so critically important. And as a man who's teaching in elementary school, I think it's an area that we need to, as a country, focus on too, is putting more men in the younger grades.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
I would. Luckily I work at a school that's very diverse gender-wise, and a lot of teachers, have male, female teachers. My very first teaching job, I was the only guy at the school. So it was me and the janitor. So that
in the
was
entire
interesting.
school?
In the entire school. Wow. Everybody, it was funny. But at that point, I was used to it. My education classes where I was the only guy in those classes too. So it kind of grew into it. But to see the difference. But I mean, it's good to have role models of every type.
Yes. Absolutely. Miss Reed being one of them.
Yeah, exactly. Lucky me.
Yes, lucky you. And lucky us to have you here today
I
on this
appreciate
episode.
it.
I really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. It's been a blast.
Thank you, Eric.